Introduction: Risk Management in the Modern Arizona Real Estate Environment. Throughout this course, we have examined how agency relationships are created, how fiduciary duties operate, how disclosure laws protect consumers, and how agency relationships may eventually terminate. As we approach the conclusion of this course, it is important to recognize that agency law does not exist only in contracts and statutes. Agency law operates in the daily communication habits of real estate professionals. In today's marketplace, many agency risks arise through modern communication tools such as email, text messaging, and social media platforms. Real estate professionals in the Phoenix metropolitan area routinely communicate with clients through mobile phones, direct messages, online marketing platforms, and automated systems. While these tools improve efficiency and convenience, they also create new risks for licensees who must remain compliant with Arizona revised statutes, Title 32, Chapter 20, and the Arizona Administrative Code R428 Commissioner's Rules. Modern risk management focuses on ensuring that communications remain professional, documented, transparent, and compliant with the duties of honesty, disclosure, and reasonable care established under AAC R428-1101. When licensees understand how modern communication tools interact with agency obligations, they can protect both their clients and their brokerage while reducing the likelihood of complaints filed with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. A. Email and text communication risks. Email and text messaging have become the most common methods of communication between real estate agents and their clients. While these communication tools are convenient and fast, they also create legal exposure when agents provide incomplete information, give advice outside their area of expertise, or fail to properly document transaction discussions. Under AAC R428 1101A, licensees must exercise reasonable care and diligence when providing information to clients or other parties in a transaction. When communication occurs through quick text messages, agents sometimes unintentionally provide advice without sufficient context or documentation. For example, imagine a buyer in Chandler texting their agent late in the evening, asking whether they should waive the inspection contingency in order to compete with other buyers. If the agent simply replies, "Yes, that's what most buyers are doing right now," without explaining the risks, the agent could potentially expose themselves to liability if defects are later discovered. Written electronic communication also becomes part of the permanent transaction record and may be used in legal disputes. Risk management strategies for email and text communication include documenting key conversations through formal emails, confirming instructions in writing, and avoiding advice that should be provided by attorneys, inspectors, or financial professionals. Real estate professionals should also remember that electronic communication may create evidence in disputes or ADRI investigations. Maintaining professional communication standards protects both the licensee and the consumer. Key risk management practices include confirming important decisions through email or transaction management platforms, avoiding casual advice that could be interpreted as professional recommendations outside the licensee's expertise, maintaining professional tone in all written communications, documenting major client decisions related to contingencies, disclosures, or negotiations. B. Social media representation exposure. Social media platforms have become powerful marketing tools for real estate professionals. Agents regularly promote listings, market their services, and interact with potential clients through platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. However, these platforms can also create agency confusion and regulatory exposure if agents fail to clearly identify their brokerage or properly represent their role in a transaction. Under AAC R428-502, advertising must clearly and prominently identify the employing broker or brokerage name. Failure to properly identify the brokerage in social media posts may result in disciplinary action from the Arizona Department of Real Estate. Additionally, agents must be careful not to accidentally create implied agency relationships through online conversations. For example, a buyer may send a direct message through social media asking detailed questions about a listing. If the agent provides advice about pricing strategy, negotiation tactics, or inspection issues without clarifying representation status, the buyer could later claim that an implied agency relationship existed. Risk management in social media marketing requires agents to maintain professional boundaries and clearly communicate their role in every interaction. In the Phoenix market, where buyers frequently discover properties through online platforms, agents must carefully balance marketing visibility with compliance requirements. Best practices include clearly identifying the brokerage in all marketing posts, avoiding detailed advice to consumers who are not represented clients, directing prospective buyers to formal representation discussions before providing guidance, ensuring that advertising remains truthful and not misleading. C. Documentation in low inventory markets. The Phoenix metropolitan area has experienced periods of extremely low housing inventory, creating highly competitive environments where buyers often submit multiple offers and sellers receive numerous competing proposals. In these situations, documentation becomes one of the most important risk management tools available to licensees. Under AAC R428-1103, designated brokers are required to maintain systems that monitor transaction compliance and ensure that documentation is properly retained. In competitive markets, agents must document the presentation of offers, communication with clients, and explanations provided to buyers regarding contract terms and contingencies. For example, if a buyer chooses to waive an appraisal contingency in order to win a bidding war in Gilbert or Queen Creek, the agent should document that the buyer understood the financial risk associated with that decision. Proper documentation protects both the client and the brokerage by demonstrating that the agent exercised reasonable care in explaining the consequences of contractual decisions. Low inventory environments can also create pressure on agents to move quickly, but compliance requirements still apply regardless of market conditions. Maintaining accurate transaction records ensures that the brokerage remains compliant with ARS par 32-2151.01, which establishes record-keeping requirements for brokers. Important documentation practices include maintaining written records of offer presentations, documenting client instructions regarding negotiation strategies, retaining copies of disclosures and advisory forms, confirming contingency waivers and contract decisions in writing. D. Compensation transparency compliance. The real estate industry has experienced significant changes in compensation transparency in recent years. As discussed earlier in this chapter, representation agreements and compensation agreements must be clearly documented and understood by the parties involved. Arizona law continues to require that compensation arrangements be disclosed and agreed upon through written agreements between the brokerage and the client. Confusion about compensation can lead to disputes, complaints, and potential disciplinary action. For example, a buyer in Mesa may assume that their agent's services are free because the seller historically paid commissions through the listing agreement. However, modern transparency practices require that buyers understand how their agent will be compensated and that compensation may be negotiated as part of the transaction structure. Licensees must ensure that representation agreements clearly explain compensation terms and that consumers understand their financial obligations before entering into contractual relationships. Transparency about compensation not only protects consumers, but also strengthens the professional reputation of the brokerage. As the industry continues to evolve, brokers must maintain clear documentation and communication regarding compensation agreements to ensure compliance with both brokerage policy and regulatory expectations. Discussion questions. Why can email and text messaging create legal risks for real estate professionals? Answer. Because informal electronic communication can lead to misunderstandings, incomplete advice, and documentation that may be used in legal disputes. How can social media conversations accidentally create implied agency relationships? Answer. If an agent provides advice or guidance without clarifying representation status, the consumer may believe the agent represents them. Why is documentation especially important during competitive market conditions? Answer. Because buyers and sellers often make fast decisions under pressure, and written documentation proves that the agent explained the risks and consequences.